Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 268 of Humanity Rising. Today, we want to just contemplate the wonder and beauty of the earth and the awareness that the earth is round and the earth has different, what they call telluric energies. So that depending on where you are on the surface of your beautiful planet, which is your home, which is our home, the earth is communicating different frequencies, different tonalities. And these tonalities shape culture, can illuminate the imagination, and provide a pathway to spiritual enlightenment. So that's going to be our theme for today, the magic and mystery of a single spot on planet Earth that contains a frequency of the feminine that is like no other spot in the world. And that is the beauty and mystery of Chartres in France. Before we dive into this wondrous domain, let us take a moment, as we always do, and just center yourself in your body. Close your eyes and attune yourself now to your heart. Listen to your heartbeat for just a moment in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive, that we're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. And now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude and love for each and every one of you joining our session today, I want to talk about, I think, one of my favorite subjects, and that is about the telluric, the earth energies nestled in a small little town of Chartres, about 45 miles west of Paris in the beautiful country of France. It's a spot that we go to every year for our pilgrimage to a sacred site there that's been associated with the feminine, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I thought that we would start with Rick showing a short video just of the town, of the cathedral that is found there, and the beauty of that particular part of the world. Rick? Rick, there's no sound somehow. Rick will try it again, but it's a beautiful cathedral. Chartres is the site of what they call the Queen of the Cathedrals. And it is one of the most extraordinary masterpieces actually in the world. Some consider Chartres Cathedral to be on a par with the Taj Mahal as one of the most beautiful architectural masterpieces in the history of the world. It's quite an extraordinary edifice.
Hey, Jim, if the sound doesn't come up, maybe you could just narrate through it. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, somehow the sound isn't taking from the videos, but this is a view of Chartres Cathedral at night. During the summer months, July, August, September, the city of Chartres has these light shows against the cathedral and other architectural monuments in the town. This is the cathedral, the Gothic spires that right on the top of the hill. This is the western portal, which dates back over 1,000 years. These are the spires. You see the one on the left, the solar spire, the one on the right, the lunar spire. It was originally designed to have 9 different spires. These are the flying buttresses that keep the cathedral intact, which was necessary because the cathedrals are so tall, they would fall over were it not for the flying buttresses. This is the south portal. You can see behind the rose window of the Cosmic Mother. Here is the western facade. This is the picture of the cathedral from a river about a mile or so away. You can see how massive it is. These are the rose windows as they look from the outside of the cathedral. Here's just a scene from the village. It's really a small town, an exquisite French village. Here's a bird just flying through the sky right by the cathedral. Another view of the cathedral. And you can just see how the cathedral completely dominates the landscape, and it soars into the sky. It's unique among cathedrals for reasons I'll describe momentarily. Here's a picture of what we call the mother tree, where in 2005 we had the illumination to set up the mystery school there. This is a group of students just gathering around the mother tree in contemplation. It's a sycamore tree that has been held sacred since ancient times, first by the Egyptians as a tree with a tonality of intelligence and fecundity, and able to give one the power to traverse between the veils, between the worlds. That's the tonality of the sycamore tree. And in the spirit of the Druids, we consecrate ourselves each year in the cathedral, certainly, but also down by the mother tree. And there's the cathedral in all her majesty. She stood intact for over 800 years. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Rick. That was wonderful. So let me, just in the time that we have today, I'd like to just share the story of Chartres and why I love it so much. It's my North Star since I came into the university starting in 2005. When I came into the university, I was just as ignorant as most North American white males about anything that truly mattered. I'd been doing international politics with Gorbachev and flying all over the world and talking about nuclear weapons and, environmental remediation and regeneration and social and anthropological issues. And then 9/11 happened, and the war on terror superseded any kind of elegant politics in the world. And I went into the wilderness for a few years, not sure what I was going to do next with my life. And then one day in the summer of 2004, I got a call from a very wise woman named Apila Colorado, who's an elder in the Iroquois Nation. She's also Celtic. And she said, Jim, I had a dream last night that you're supposed to go into education. And I happened to be on the faculty of a school in Oakland, California, that is closing down. It's going bankrupt. And I just have this feeling that this is your next phase of work. It had never occurred to me to go into education because I was too kinetic. I'm just too active, and I like to just do stuff in the world. And education seemed to me to be a bit passive. So I thanked her very much and kept on going. At the time, I was working with George Soros on globalization issues. And then in early December, Pila called back and in a very stern voice said, Jim, I had another dream. You need to listen to me. And she stopped my world. And the next thing I knew, a couple weeks later, I met with Matthew Fox, the founder of the university, and he explained the dire predicament that they were in. And I looked at the curriculum. It was an extraordinary curriculum. They had this curriculum where you did a seminar in the morning after doing body work, yoga or Tai Chi or anything to kind of come into the body. Then they do 3 hours of intense intellectual work, and then lunch, and then 3 hours of creative art, music, working with clay, improv, comedy, dance, all kinds of artistic expression. And then they would close the day with an integration where they would just go over the day and what had come up. And I thought, this is a work of genius. And so I took the job. And in February, on the St. Brigitte's Day, on February 2nd of 2005, I entered the university, and I was kind of shell-shocked because it had happened pretty quickly. And I was consulting with Apila, and I said, Apila, tell me what I should do. I mean, I want to do this in a correct way, and I've never done this before. And she says, well, first, you have to dedicate your tenure to the feminine. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. I wasn't really aware of the feminine before. at the level that she was communicating it. And she says, you need to dedicate your tenure to Mary Magdalene and the Black Madonna. And she explained Mary Magdalene is, the consort of Jesus, and had a powerful role in shaping the ministry of Jesus as lover and as counselor and as beloved disciple. And the Black Madonna. I really wasn't familiar with the Black Madonna. That's a kind of feminine energy and the divine pleroma of the sacred feminine that carries the darkness, and out of the darkness shapes light and redemption. She says, if you dedicate your tenure to the sacred feminine, wondrous things will happen. And it was like St. John of the Cross, those opening words of his masterwork, that I went out without discerning and with nothing to guide me except that which in my heart was burning. That's how I felt at that moment. So when Apila told me about the guidance of the sacred feminine, I just surrendered to that. And then she said, we need to take a pilgrimage to France. So dutifully, I began to organize a pilgrimage. And in October of 2005, with about 40 students, with Apila and Andrew Harvey, one of the great contemporary mystics of our time, we went to France, and to follow in the footsteps of Mary Magdalene, who, according to tradition, after the death and resurrection and ascension of Jesus in Palestine, she went to Alexandria in Egypt for a number of years, and according to tradition actually wrote what became known as the Gospel of John. And then she went with Joseph of Arimathea and the daughter that she had with Jesus, Sarah, to France, and landed not far from Marseille, and traveled around the central France, and went to the Baum forest, and you can go to the cave, which we did. And then there's a place called Vézelay, that had a strand of her hair. And according to tradition, she went to Chartres, and you can even see the relic of her body in one of the churches where she's by tradition associated with. And going through that thing, we went to Roc Amador. And in fact, this statue is the Black Madonna of Roc Amador near the Pyrenees. And there are hundreds of Black Madonnas in Europe. And this Madonna is considered the most potent in terms of her spiritual, energetic capacity to save and to redeem. So this is very precious to me. I got this during that trip after having a rather powerful experience sitting in front of her. This is the Black Madonna that's in the church in Roc Amador. And then we ended up going to Chartres, the final stop on our tour. I'd never heard of Chartres before. I can't overestimate how green and naive and ignorant a man I still am, but I was even more so then. Never heard of Chartres, never heard of Chartres Cathedral. And we had a wonderful experience there, and Apila led us down to what we saw a few minutes ago of the mother tree. And we all consecrated ourselves, and I had an illumination of deep deep import that really both knocked me down and awoke me in a very profound, incontrovertible way. And out of that experience, I was reading a book by René Carados, The Golden Age of Chartres, that one of the students just handed to me. And I read that it was in 1006 that the Chartres Academy was founded. And I realized that we were 2005, the next year was 2006, and that would be the 1000th anniversary of the founding of the Chartres Academy. And when I realized that thought, every cell in my body came alive, and I knew in my being that the initial impulse of whatever I was going to do as president of this university had to be grounded in Chartres on the 1000th anniversary of the founding of the Chartres Academy. Let me stand back and let me now just tell you the story of Chartres and how that Chartres Academy 1,000 years ago now came into being, and how it shaped history, and how it shaped our university, and how it's shaping the world. It was about 3,500 years ago that the Celtic nation, Celtic peoples, came out of Central Europe, Austria, Hungary, and swept into Western Europe, into Belgium and Holland and Western Germany, France, up into England. And their spiritual leaders were the Druids. So the Celtic peoples were not just your ordinary barbarians, as they're called by the Romans. These were people of an astute spiritual intelligence, such that we still are in awe of the Druids. The Druids were people of the oak tree. And according to Julius Caesar in his commentaries, because he was in that area and he conquered that area, he said the Druids were the most remarkable people. And that's the first description that we have of the Druids, that they were in training for at least 20 years. And it was open to men and to women. And they didn't build any buildings. They had tents and they had places to live, but they didn't build temples, because for them, the temple was the tree. The temple was the running stream. The temple was the configurations of nature that were in a particular geometric form, so that there was a certain release of energy that could be discerned. And if you aligned yourself and opened yourself to the energy of the earth, that was the temple. The leader of the Druids was called the Voice, because as they mastered the telluric energies of the earth and realized that the earth was not the same everywhere, that if you move around the earth, there are different configurations of energy, and that if you use sound in a particular way, that sound could have massive impact. You could open into the invisible realms. With certain sounds, you could change shapes and go into the ether. You could become an animal. You could become a bird. Through sound, you can conjure magic that could heal. So these Druids were an extremely sophisticated spiritual intelligence. And as they were moving around Europe and they came to Chartres, at the time there was a big hill of Chartres, limestone hill. And at the top of the hill was a huge granite promontory. And then between the granite and the limestone, there was a grotto. And when the Druids entered the grotto, they were astonished because the potency of that energy was of a particular frequency that was of a virgin woman in expectation of impregnation. That's how good these people were. Not just we feel the feminine energy. That's easy if you're morally mature and adept. But to get the particular kind of the feminine, that's what the Druids were good at. And that's where they stopped, because they said, this hill is our Vatican. You think of Vatican for the St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome, but it's actually a Celtic word. It means the seat. So for the Druids, Chartres became the seat, the Vatican of the Celtic nation. And 4 times a year, and in particular, at the end of October, early November, what we know in the Christian tradition as All Saints' Day, that's when the veil between the worlds is particularly thin. The Feast of the Dead. They would gather in Chartres. And they did this for 1,500 years, refining their spirituality. And then in about 60 BC, who marches in to Gaul, as it was called then, but Julius Caesar, one of the great military geniuses of all time, with a mission to conquer. And conquer he did. And there's very famous stories in his commentaries of how in the final battle, the Celts, led by the Druids, amassed over 250,000 men. But they could not counter the genius of Caesar. And in the end, were conquered and vanquished. But the spirit did not die. And that's why a lot of the Druids went up into England, into Wales, and into Ireland, because they were safe there against the Roman onslaught. Although Julius Caesar, as you know, also went and invaded Britain, but only in the southern parts. And then within a century or so, the Christians began to come. And by tradition, Mary Magdalene and Joseph of Arimathea. And it was said that, after their exploration of France, Joseph of Arimathea went up into England to Glastonbury and with the chalice, and you know all those stories and the Arthurian legends that ensued after that. And then Mary Magdalene stayed in France and spent out her years in the cave in the Baum Forest. And it's just worth noting that the Baum Forest, the forest was a forest dedicated to Artemis, in the Greek goddess, or Diana, the Roman goddess, the goddess of the hunt, the goddess of, she was one of the four virginal goddesses in the Greco-Roman pantheon, the goddess of fertility, the goddess of childbirth, but a potent warrior hunter goddess. And it was in that energetic that Mary Magdalene spent her days. History progressed. And then in 800, you remember Charlemagne, the first of the Holy Roman Empire emperors, and he had a grandson called Charles the Bald. And Charles the Bald bequeathed to Chartres what they call today, you can still see it in the cathedral, the Sancta Camisia, the veil that Mary wore on the occasion of the birth of Jesus. She kept her veil, and it became a relic. And it ended up at the court of Charlemagne, and then his grandson, Charles the Bald, bequeathed that veil to the bishop in Chartres. And there's a very famous story of in the 9th century, when the Normans, the Vikings that were coming out of Denmark and Norway and Sweden were attacking into France to trade and to get slaves, that the bishop held that Sancta Camisia up on the walls of Chartres, and it's seeing that relic, the Vikings melted away and the city was saved. And at that time, the little town of Chartres began to mature and became a little trading town. And then in about 100 years later, in 1006, who shows up but this Italian priest called Fulbert? And he had been a friend of Pope Sylvester. They had gone to school together. The guy that ended up to be the Pope at that time ended up being a friend, and one thing led to another, and Fulbert was assigned to become the bishop in Chartres. And he came with an astrolabe, which was an astronomical device used to calculate the stars and the astronomical sciences of which he was very conversant. And he was also carrying a copy of the Timaeus, one of the books, the dialogues of Plato. And at that time, the Timaeus was the only book of Plato that anybody knew about in Europe. It wasn't until way later, through the Arabs and the Muslims, that we got the full compendium of Plato. And he founded the Chartres Academy. And he, like the Druids, was an extraordinarily sensitive man. And he discerned that, this is a powerful energy here. And this is the energy of the feminine. Although for Fulbert, unlike the Druids, the energy was not of a virgin expecting a child. It was a virgin who had had a child, the Christ child. And Fulbert dedicated the Chartres Academy to the Cosmic Mother. And there's a very famous story of Fulbert, that he got very ill with the plague, think COVID. And he was in a high fever for days, and people thought he was going to die. And in his delirium of the fever, he had a vision. Mother Mary came to him and bent over his feverish body and bared her breast. And Fulbert suckled her breast and was healed. And got up the next day full of songs and poems to the mother that he wrote down. And it was because of Fulbert that there became a feast day to Mary the Mother in the church calendar. And it was in Chartres that there began to incubate this notion of mother. Up until that point in Christianity, for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, it was about Christ, the Pantocrator, Christ, the creator and destroyer, Christ, the savior and redeemer, saving us from the wrath of God. And it was only beginning around 1000 AD, coming into fruition, flowering fruition in the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries, when hundreds of cathedrals were built all across Europe to Notre Dame, to the Mother, in part because of the Black Death. People in pain don't want their fathers. They do not want to be in the hands of a wrathful God. They want their mothers. They want nurturing. They want sustenance. And Fulbert channeled that energy of the divine feminine. And out of that, he was bishop for 20 years. And during his tenure as bishop, the old church burnt down. And he built a new one, completely dedicated to the feminine. And one of the characteristics of Chartres Cathedral to the present day is that nobody's buried there. It's on the same alignment of the pyramids in Stonehenge. It's one of the few, if not the only cathedral where on the walls are not just Christian saints, but Pythagoras, Aristotle, Jewish mystics. One of the stained glasses is of the zodiac inside the cathedral. And there's even a stained glass window dedicated to Mary as the descendant of Jesse. And that was
Jim, we have a video of that if you want me to play it. Of the windows, the interior of the church.
Oh, yeah, just in a minute, yeah. But just so that you see that for Fulbert, he was the one that started this notion of Mary on equal standing with Jesus. So we have the stories of Jesus being the son of David. And Mary kind of shows up somewhere and they trace it through Joseph. But Fulbert said, no, Mary is the daughter of David, just like Joseph was. And there's a famous stained glass window to Mary as the daughter of David and Jesse, who was David's father. So fast forward 1,000 years, because what had happened was that the church that Fulbert had built also burnt down. And it burnt down in 1196. And it was an incredible moment where they thought that everything had been burnt except for the western facade. Everything else was rubble. And in the rubble was the Sancta Commisia, the veil of Mary. And there was huge consternation and outpouring of grief. And they looked everywhere and couldn't find anything. And on the third day, the bishop came to mourn with the people in a ceremony of loss. And as the ceremony was unfolding, 3 priests emerged out of the rubble. They'd gone down into the basement while the church was burning with the Sancta Commisia. And they came out holding up the Sancta Commisia. And you can imagine the electricity that went through the crowd there in 1196. And in one voice, they said, "We will rebuild." And in the next 26 years, which has got to be a world record, they erected, I think, the most magnificent piece of architecture ever built. Again, alongside the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal was dedicated to love of a man and a woman. And Chartres Cathedral was designed and dedicated to the great mother, the cosmic mother, and the cosmic son. And what they embedded in stone and glass was the eternal verities. It's like a book. It's like a Bible. Everything is a perfection in that cathedral, a geometric, arithmetic perfection of angles. So that as you enter into that cathedral, as Plato said, the purpose of architecture is to elevate the soul. If you go into a beautiful building, if you stand before a masterpiece of art, it actually reverberates through your body and you are elevated. And that's the purpose of looking at beauty. Beauty reaches out to you and transforms you, even in the act of beholding beauty. Beauty is not passive. Beauty is transformational. And so when you go into even if you put on a beautiful dress or you put on a beautiful shirt or you adorn yourself in some way, that actually elevates your psychic, psycho-emotional, energetic tonality. So if you enter into a massive cathedral and you just behold the grandeur, that's a spiritual experience in and of itself. So let's take a moment, Rick, and show a little bit about the stained glass and so forth. That's the north rose window. That's the window. See right here is the cosmic mother, and every glass has meaning, which I don't have the time to go into. You see the doves above her. The doves descending, as T.S. Eliot puts it. And you'll see the 5 windows below, the spires of this one in the middle here is Sarah, the mother of Mary. There's a depiction of Mary in one of the statues that you find in the cathedral. There's over 485 depictions of the feminine in Chartres Cathedral. This is Mary Magdalene. This is down into the crypt. I will show you something of the crypt in a few minutes, but this is a little sanctuary dedicated to Mary Magdalene. This is the Black Madonna. This is again in the crypt. We'll show a little video of the crypt in a moment, but this is the Black Madonna of Chartres. Again, just note how the woman, the feminine, dwarfs the male. And this is the Sancta Commune. There's a gate here, but you just see right here, that's the veil, a piece of the veil that Mary wore on the occasion of the birth of Jesus. And this is what they call the Lady of the Pillar. Here's the pillar. And this is very famous Lady of the Pillar that is in the cathedral to the north, right below the north rose window. You see the Gothic architecture here, which the Templars, the Knights Templars, got from the Sufis. Here's another little statue of Mary Magdalene on one of the walls of the cathedral. I love Chartres so much. It just fills my heart with such joy seeing these, Rick. Thank you. You all need to go to Chartres. And this is really beautiful. See, to the extreme left is Mary Magdalene. To the extreme right is Jesus. It's one of the most beautiful depictions of the masculine and feminine, both reaching out for one another. Here's Mary Magdalene just reaching for Jesus. It's beautiful, beautiful statuary. And here's again Mary Magdalene at the foot of the cross. In every tradition, Mary Magdalene was there at the crucifixion and was the first person to greet the risen Lord. Here's some stained glass. I think that's the Mary Magdalene window. When you come to Chartres with me, I can tell you the whole story of the window. Here's the top of that window and the kind of the ascension of Mary Magdalene into the heavenly realms. And there's the three women. That was Mary, mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and they often refer to as the other Mary. Not much is known about the other Mary that was there at the crucifixion. You can see the exquisiteness of how they designed it. So you look anywhere and you see beauty and you're just overwhelmed with extraordinarily intricate. This is the floor of the Magdalene Chapel. Ancient tapestry. Oh, and here's the very famous Blue Madonna. When the Fulbert's church burnt down, this Madonna right in the center there, those three stained glasses were the only things that survived. And they framed it in a beautiful, beautiful way. Thank you, Rick. That was magnificent. That was magnificent. So anyway, the Chartrian Masters held forth for about 250 years. They built the cathedral, and then in one of the mysteries of history, as the rest of Europe was going, Aristotelian and scholastic and building, the first universities in Paris and in Bologna and around rigorous, logical, scientific methodologies, having built this incredible edifice to the mysteries, the Chartrian Academy just disappeared, literally disappeared, melted away. And then in the 20th century, after the Second World War in the 1960s, who shows up in Chartres but Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, who called when he entered into Chartres Cathedral, he says, "This is the womb of the world." And he was accompanied by Jean Houston. And one of the characteristics of Chartres Cathedrals right at the beginning is the labyrinth. And we're going to show you the labyrinth in a few minutes, but they've this massive labyrinth. And you walk the labyrinth. And as you come into the cathedral, you walk the labyrinth and you let go of everything that you think you are. And you go to the center of that labyrinth. And when they built it, in the 12th century, 800 years ago, there was a big bronze plaque of Theseus and the Minotaur. Remember the story of Theseus and the Minotaur? The king of Minos every year would sacrifice 14 Greek men and women to the Minotaur. And Theseus went and was going to save him. And he met Ariadne, the daughter of the king, and she gave him this thread that enabled him not to lose his way into the labyrinth. And so when you walk the Chartrian labyrinth right at the center, until the time of Napoleon, when they melted it down for a cannonball, such as the crassness of modernity, that was the mythological framework of the Chartrian spiritual experience of somehow finding the Ariadne's thread, going right down into the deep dark of the Minotaur and finding your way back out. And Jean Houston said, the labyrinth here in Chartres is the icon of the new world. One of her students, Lauren Artress, who was at the time one of the deans of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, dedicated herself to the labyrinth. And after the French Revolution, and by the way, during the French Revolution, they almost burnt Chartres down, if you can imagine that, angry mobs. They were spared, but they filled up the well and they put chairs over the labyrinth, and no one had walked the labyrinth in 800 years until Lauren Artress. And one of the greatest acts of civil disobedience and civil rectitude. One day, about 20 years ago, Lauren Artress cleared away the chairs and walked the labyrinth. She's one of the heroes of our time, Lauren Artress. She started an organization called Veriditas. And it was with Lauren Artress when we showed up in 2005, she'd already been there, opening up the space. And because she was a dean of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, who had a partnership with Chartres Cathedral in France, she was protected. And somehow in the mysterious workings of spirit, the church ecclesiastical structure, after 800 years, began to say, well, maybe there is something about this labyrinth. And they began to open it up on Friday afternoons. But the rest of the time it was closed. But they started to allow certain groups to use it at night. And so in 2005, when we showed up on the 1000th anniversary of the founding of the Chartres Academy, that had so profoundly illuminated the 7 liberal arts of Pythagoras and Plato and really brought the deep learning and mysteries of antiquity into the vessel of Christianity, but in a theological way in which there was no original sin, only original blessing. There was no need of redemption on the cross because everything in the world is a redemptive experience if you just can attune yourself with beauty. The Chartrian Masters were some of the most radical theologians and spiritual adepts in history, particularly in Christianity, given the fact that at the time there was the Inquisition. But somehow they were able to choreograph with such subtlety the profound truths that have emanated from the deepest history of our kind. And then to build an entire cathedral that embodied that in stone and glass. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable when you go in there. It's what David Strachan calls jewel darkness. So what we would like to do right now is play you a couple of videos. One of the things that we do, so every year we have gone to Chartres, and each year we study one of the 7 liberal arts in the spirit of the Chartrian Masters of 1,000 years ago, who had drawn their inspiration. Remember, Fulbert was carrying the Timaeus from Plato. So we trace our lineage of Ubiquity University back to Chartres, the 7 liberal arts, and through that portal back to Pythagoras and Plato and Aristotle, that 2,500 years ago had fashioned what has become known as the 7 liberal arts. Pythagoras came up with what they call the quadrivium, the first 4, which is music, arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy. And then Plato came up, and Aristotle came up with what they call the trivium, which is grammar and dialectics, and rhetorica. And we started in 2006, and each year we've done one. We've been through two complete cycles. And each time we go there, we go down into the crypt, and then we all walk the labyrinth together. So Rick, why don't you show the video of the crypt? And that's where the lower church is. That's where the Black Madonna is. Because obviously over the centuries, like any archaeological dig where you keep building on top of the old, what we have now is up here, but you can go down layers. So you can go down into the bowels of the underchurch, where there's the deep primordial energies. So Rick, and we have ceremony there. So Rick, why don't you play the video of the crypt? So that's the crypt. And we generally we arrive on a Sunday for an opening ceremony in what we call the secret garden, or we go down to the mother tree. And then on Mondays, normally we like to go into the crypt, and the cathedral is very generous with groups that have been going there for some time to allow us to go into the cathedral after it closes around 7:30 p.m. So you get to have the crypt all to yourself. And then the high point comes generally on Wednesday when we, after preparations, teachings, we enter into the labyrinth. That's really the high holy ritual for our time in Chartres. So we first descend into the crypt, into the darkness, and then we come out and walk the labyrinth with the full splendor of the stained glass windows around us. It's to music that is being played. It's an extraordinary spiritual experience to walk the labyrinth in Chartres Cathedral. So, Rick, why don't you play the video about the labyrinth? That's the labyrinth. That was Banafsheh Sayad, who's the co-director of the Chartres Academy, whirling. That was also a historic moment, actually. It was at the special invitation of the director of ritual of the cathedral, who felt that it was very important in our time for a woman to dance, whirl, do some Sufi whirling in the center of the labyrinth. So at his special invitation 2 years ago, we culminated our labyrinth walk in that manner. As it was powerful, powerful energy. You could just feel the elevation of the spiritual quality as the feminine presence whirled in the center of the labyrinth. So let me just conclude this session and these remarks on Chartres by saying that we're in one of those moments where darkness stalks the land, turmoil, uncertainty, insecurity is omnipresent in a ubiquitous way in our world. And at the heart of that sits the Black Madonna and the Great Mother, holding all the darkness, taking all our pain, all our suffering into her bosom, and graciously, forgivingly, infinitely compassionately molding our ignorance, our ineptitude, our violence and destructive acts to ourselves and to each other and to the world into a tapestry that redeems. That's at the heart of the Black Madonna. And that's why we go down into the crypt. And that's why we reverence the sacred feminine each and every day. And why we go to Chartres, because we're in one of those moments in history where nothing less than the feminine will suffice to save us from ourselves. And that's why in deep distress, people turn to their mothers. She helps us save ourselves from ourselves with infinite love and compassion, because she doesn't care who we are or what we've done. She just loves us. And that's the love we need right now. That's the love we have to somehow embody. And going to Chartres every year helps us at the university. It helps me remember that that's what's really going on. It's not the politics of Biden at the G7. It's not Putin, arresting Navalny. It's not Bolsonaro, doing all his machinations in Brazil. That's the froth at the top of the ocean. Those are the waves that beat against the rocks. They have reality, but it's the deeper reality, the quiet at the bottom of the ocean. That's where we need to go as often as we can, at least once a year. And that's what we do at Ubiquity. Every year we've gone to Chartres without exception. Bedrock, the sanctum sanctorum of the community that sustains Ubiquity University, that sustains our wisdom school, that sustains Humanity Rising. It's not happening because I convene these panels every day. It's happening because there's an upsurge of telluric energy through us, because we've opened ourselves to the mother, to the Black Madonna. And whatever your perspective in terms of your spiritual tradition or your politics, I don't say this in any kind of an ideological way. I actually say it in an existentially ontological way. This is just the way the world works. That's why we call her Mother Earth. We're creatures of the mother. And all the iconography of Chartres, all the iconography of the Taj Mahal, all the beautiful statues of Kuan Yin and Kali and Durga, all the saints, Mother Teresa's of the world, Hildegard de Bingen's, are just fractals of the mother. And it was even Carl Jung that said, no one embarks upon the pathway of individuation without going through the feminine. That's just the way the world is made. All of us come out of the mother, and all of us return to the mother. And going to Chartres reminds us of this. Remember what Plato said, all learning in the end, he says, is not about the acquisition of knowledge. It's about remembering the truth that has always been. And when you go into that truth, you find beauty and you find goodness. And that's why the great Trinity is truth, beauty, and goodness. So it's within that container that we're called upon as spiritual beings having a human experience to lead our lives. So each year in Chartres, we go deep into that mystery, and then we contain the contradictions, the waves at the top of the ocean, but from the point of view of sitting in the deep stillness of the mother. So I appreciate these moments together, and I thank you. This is the first time I've taken a session on day 268 to just express something that I deeply love. But I thought it would be potentially of benefit to you to understand more deeply what animates me in my world. And one of the reasons why I show up so excited every day on Humanity Rising is because I love doing this, because she's always at my side. And she guides what I do. And she graces the work of ubiquity and all of what you're doing. Every act of goodness in the world right now is being shaped by the mother. That's just what's true. And it's our capacity to remember that. It's our capacity to embody that that gives us ultimate meaning in this time of complete craziness. And that's what shapes our community. So I just want to thank everyone for being present today, but being present for humanity. Now, Rick will close us out with a little bit of music from Ruth Cunningham, who graced us at the beginning, and we play her music from Chartres every day. I've never said anything about it, but just so you know, when you hear that beautiful melodic voice to the Ave Maria, that's Ruth Cunningham singing in the cathedral. That's Chartres.
So
Thank you, everyone.